Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever time it is you're watching, and welcome back once again to the Harbor Trust Financial Podcast. I'm your host, Shane, joined here with my co-host today, Phil, as always. And today we are going to be talking about getting your priorities straight. There's a concept out there that not a lot of people are aware of, and I was not even aware of this until I started my career in the financial industry. There's something called the pyramid of financial planning, or the pyramid of financial priorities. You can name it a bunch of things, the hierarchy of financial needs. However, there's a structure in place for a very specific reason. We're going to break that down today because this is the answer to one of the most common questions that we get, which is, how do I start? How do I kick things off financially? Like, I just got my job, I just started working, or it could just be somebody who's finally decided to take their finances seriously. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
And today we're going to break that down in three categories. And Phil, if you just want to zoom out on our pyramid here, we have this for reference, and this is going to be made available in the description. Just going to be a link down there where you can click and access a visual template of the pyramid of financial priorities. But the three sections we're going to talk about is financial foundations, personal priorities, and then growth. In three levels, and per level there's two aspects that we're going to break down at a bit of a deeper level, but not too deep. I think the point here today is just to understand what order to do things in. There's nothing linear. There's nothing that's, this isn't a law by any means. However, it's a really good guideline, and it's fundamental to making sure you're financially secure and you're doing things the right way.
Yeah. Well, we have anywhere between 40 to 50 products.
Right.
To be able to show people or
Right.
to give someone wants. So which one to choose from?
Yeah.
Which one to start with?
Yeah.
Right? So it's important to know the foundation to cover the needs versus the wants.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, we were just talking about this, like, you want what you don't need, and you typically need what you don't want.
Correct.
And unfortunately, that often leads to some financial pitfalls for people, and that's kind of where we see, I'm not going to say crisis scenarios, but worst case scenarios usually happen from that mindset. And today we're going to kind of demystify that, if you will, and try to break it down in a bit more of a holistic way. So starting at the core, starting at the bottom, financial foundation. I'm saying this is called a pyramid because it literally is a pyramid. You can't put the cap on top if you haven't started putting the blocks on the bottom.
Yep.
And the biggest layer of a pyramid is always the foundation, the bottom of the pyramid. And I would say that this is a very good representation of this first topic, which is the unforeseeable events. The first question you're asking yourself to directly answer, how do I get started? Do you have anything in place for unforeseeable events, right, Phil? So when we talk about unforeseeable events, what kind of products, financially speaking, are we looking at?
Covers a death, disability, and critical illness.
So those are three very distinguishable products in terms of insurance, in terms of living benefits. Can you maybe open up that a little bit more on terms of why death, why disability, why critical illness? Why those three? It sounds a lot, right? It sounds like it's, well, geez, all my money's going to be gobbled up in insurance. Like, why should I start there?
Well, first of all, let's start with death.
Right.
All your bills or your debt doesn't follow you when you pass away.
Exactly.
So somebody else will need to take care of that. We also did an episode, a previous episode about life insurance.
Yes.
But death need to be covered because your debt doesn't follow you.
No.
Okay. Disability. Now, a lot of people will say, I have that through work. 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 I don't need it. I have that through work. But what's the following question that we need to ask, or they need to ask themselves, is what exactly do I have through work?
How much?
How much? Is there a waiting period? What's my disability? A lot of people will start into a new career, or will even if their plan switches or whatnot, and they don't take a look at it. And it's not that we don't want to. Maybe just don't make the time to look at it.
For sure.
So it's important to look at what is the base in your work coverage, and what does your disability cover?
Right.
Do you have short-term? Do you have long-term disability? What's the waiting period? Is there a waiting period? Do you even have coverage? Is your spouse covered?
Right.
No.
Yeah, answer is always no. But,
Is your kids
yeah,
covered?
it's
No.
good.
But that's the disability is important because we'll do an episode just on disability. But and the third one is critical illness.
Yes.
Critical illness, it could be a lot of expenses, out of pocket expenses. It's not because you have a group plan that your critical illness, all the medication, all the out of pocket expenses will be covered.
Right.
No.
And when we talk critical illness, I mean, like, to name some very common ones: cancer, stroke, heart attack,
Bypass surgery.
heart illnesses. I mean, this isn't stuff that's like, this isn't one-off scenarios here that we're talking about. This is really common. Listeners at home, I want you to think about someone in your immediate surrounding that could be a father of a friend. It could be immediately in your family. It could be even yourself, of somebody that's been affected by this. So we just want to make sure that we're not talking about this because we want to scare people into understanding the importance of living benefits insurance as a foundation for your financial planning journey. This is a lot about. It's because it's relevant. It's because it's real. It's because it's very common. So I just wanted to make that point there as well on critical illness. I'll let you continue there, but difference between critical illness and disability is a question that I get a lot. If I'm sick and I can't go to work, well, my disability is going to cover it, right? So what distinguishes that critical illness versus disability? Why should I get both?
Well, the critical illness will give you a lump sum of money to help pay those out-of-pocket expenses.
Right.
For an example, if I use if somebody has a heart problem or has a heart attack or whatnot, here in New Brunswick, the hospital that specializes anything for the heart is St. John.
Right.
So if you live in northern New Brunswick and it's quite the hike to go to St. John, your gas, the hotel, the food, the parking, anything related out-of-pocket expenses. Also, you may have medication that you can have, not necessarily for the heart attack, but let's say you have another critical illness, a cancer or something like that, and you have the opportunity to have a certain medication, but you need to pay for it because it's not covered by the province. That lump sum that you get from that critical illness will be able to go pay for those out-of-pocket expenses, whether it's medication or whatnot. The disability, on the other side, your work will give you a percentage of your salary. So not only that, you'll go down, there's certain work that you'll get 100% of your salary. I've seen certain occupation that have that, but not many.
Right.
So that's where the important is, to make sure that you look into your plan, what's covered, what's not covered. I'm not saying you should go get disability. I'm not saying you should go buy critical illness, but at the base, at least know what you're saying no to.
Yeah.
Understand what you have and understand what you don't have.
Very important.
Then make your own decision. Absolutely. At the end of the day, we can't force anybody.
No, of course not.
To get a certain product. We can talk about it. We can open their mind to it. We can educate them about it.
Make them understand the relevance and the impact that it would have, right? But at the end of the day, we can't call a shot for you.
No, but as long as you know what you have and you know what you don't have, then make your educational decision on that side.
Totally agree. And now that we've covered the basics, we covered the first core fundamental. You've been evaluated for your living benefits needs. You know what disability you have at work and how much it pays. You have your debts and maybe income replacement covered with life insurance. You're covered for sickness, critical illness. If it's something that runs in the family, I mean, get it while you're young. But let's say you've taken care of that. You have something in place. You start moving up in the ladder. And that's where we start looking at number 2, level 2 of this pyramid out of 6, still in the financial foundation section. We're looking at debt repayment, looking at an emergency fund, and even looking at a will to make sure that the post-mortem processes are all in place, and what you want to be given to who is predetermined. You've secured all of that. Now this is level 2. We're talking about level 2 things in this pyramid now. So emergency fund, debt repayment are probably the most relevant ones, because earlier in life that's what you're looking for. Will and protection mandate or testament, however you want to put it. Usually people will take care of that later in life, or at a point in life where maybe they have kids, or they've acquired a reasonable amount of assets where it should be allocated at this point. There's too much going on to right? Clean it all up and make sure that beneficiaries are allocated and everything's covered. But debt repayment and emergency fund, I want to start at emergency fund because now that we've covered unforeseeable events, the emergency fund is going to complement that, and it should be your first investment. Should be your first medium in building a habit for saving money is an emergency fund. And why that is I want to go back to that topic of disability, Phil, that you're mentioning. You mentioned a very important topic there, which is there a waiting period? A lot of disability policies will have a waiting period of, the average is about 3 months in terms of long-term disability policies. If you have it at work, the odds are what that means is I slip and fall on a patch of ice this morning and I can't go to work for the next year. I'm only going to get paid in 3 months.
Yeah,
I'm only
90 days.
90 days, yeah. So I'm only going to start getting paid in 90 days from my disability policy. What does that mean? Well, there's a gap there. Bills aren't going to stop for 3 months. Bills aren't going to stop for 90 days. Expenses are going to keep coming in.
Creditors don't feel bad about your...
Creditors do not pity or injury or whatever's preventing you from work. They want to be paid back and they have to be paid back. If not, that's going to lead to other consequences that become, a little bit more scary.
Interest collections,
and credit score takes a dive, and you start kind of messing things up for when you start working your way up the pyramid. That credit score is really important. We'll talk about it soon. But the emergency fund should be 3 months, minimum 3 months. We say 3 to 6, but 3 months of the value of your monthly expenses.
At the base.
At the very minimum. 3 months worth of your essential expenses. I'm not talking about all the Netflix and this and that subscriptions. I'm talking about having a roof over your head, having clean water, having food, being warm or being cooled off in the summer, depends. But those essential, having a means of transportation. Shelter, food, heat. Very minimum. And then you can work up into I would like to keep my car. I don't want to miss 3 months of car payments, right? So you can start including those expenses, but 3 months minimum of those expenses is really, really important in the emergency fund. And how you do that is you establish how much money's coming in, how much money's coming out, whatever's left over, start allocating a percentage into a TFSA, or it can just be a non-registered account, but it's got to be put somewhere. Doing it through a TFSA is probably the most efficient way of doing it because you're tax-free. You can grow that money tax-free. You can pull it out tax-free at any time. So it's probably the best vehicle to do so, and then you can invest it in a high-interest savings account like we are able to offer within our company. But I think that's the next important step. Then it's debt repayment. Any debts that you have, you can start focusing on just repaying, making a habit out of repaying the debt. Growing that credit score is going to be a consequence of that. The will and the protection mandate is something that comes a little bit later in life typically. Yeah. So anything that you wanted to add on that second level there?
No. Well, the emergency fund, very important to build. If you don't have an emergency fund, I would recommend to take a small percentage of your paycheck coming in, especially if you're new at putting some money aside. Take a small percentage, take a little bit, start creating that habit, put that aside, and in no time it should be built. So
absolutely
an important point on building that emergency fund.
Now, we've taken care of the coverages in case of unforeseeable events. We've protected ourselves and our income. We've now established the need for an emergency fund in the event that we lose our income suddenly and unforeseeably. We're repaying debts that we have, if we even have any. Could be student loans, could be a million things. Now we're going into priorities, personal priorities. Now we've taken care of this. You can start feeling comfortable about your basket. Let's start working on the future. We're going to start establishing objectives. You want to buy a house, right? You want to retire someday. If you have kids, probably want to send them to school, want to help them with those educational costs. What do we do for that? Retirement, RRSP, TFSA, RESP, FHSA. I just said 4 acronyms that are extremely important. Registered Retirement Savings Plan, Tax-Free Savings Account, Registered Educational Savings Plan, and the First Home Savings Account. These are 4 accounts that are very, very, very relevant to a lot of people across the board. RESP a bit different if you don't have kids, maybe not, but RRSP, TFSA, FHSA in order to buy a house. And if you want to buy a house, You'll retire once your house is paid off, probably, right? Do the FHSA first. The benefits of the FHSA and the RSP are the same. You deduct what you invest off of your income at the end of the year. You'll save on taxes, and your money's going to grow tax-free, sheltered from taxes until your purchase of your home. And then once you've got your home, then you can start moving that money into an RSP that you were paying, let's say $300 a month or whatever, to your FHSA. You hit your goal of getting, I don't know, 20 grand for a down payment over 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Then you can start looking at retirement. But we're now at level 3. We're in the middle of the pyramid. We're getting into personal priorities. It's to start investing into these accounts. And then comes investment funds, accelerating loan repayments, bonds, all of like the detailed investments, which is really great because that's typically where somebody wants to start.
And I was just about to mention that a lot of people we meet, they want to start at level 3.
You want to start in the middle of the pyramid.
They want to start right away. They want to invest.
Yeah.
They say, I want to grow my nest egg. I want
Right.
to have $1 million later. I don't know why people say $1 million, but it seems like it's a magic number in our industry, which if you strive for $1 million, you're not going to be able to survive later on in
It is not nearly enough, I promise.
No.
If you're our age anyways, in your 30s, 20s,
exactly.
even 40s, honestly, in 20 years from now, $1 million is not nearly enough.
No,
to retire,
because of inflation.
Because of
and
inflation,
stuff.
yeah.
And your needs and your goals at retirement. So there's a lot of factors.
Yeah.
But nonetheless to say, a lot of people want to start right in the middle of the pyramid. They want to start investing right away, and they haven't looked at the base yet. And it's okay. I mean, some people, I don't care about disability. I don't care about critical illness or bury me in the backyard or whatnot. But let's put into perspective that you have a bad luck.
Right.
And whatever it is, it's an accident or it's an illness, and you've been just savings. You put money into your RSPs, you put money in your TFSA or whatnot, and then you get hurt, you get sick, a bad luck happens. It happens every day. You know, there's statistics out there. You may know someone that went through a bad luck, maybe not you, but you may know somebody, unfortunately. And this is not to scare anybody, but it does happen. And
we got to be realistic. There's a difference between talking to scare somebody and talking about facts and trying to be realistic. And I mean, it's important to set expectations when it comes to this kind of stuff. But like you said, that point of view, I promise you, if you think hard enough, honestly, you probably don't have to think too hard to know somebody or find somebody in your inner circle, friends, family, immediately or far, that have been affected by some form of a bad luck, illness or disability, whatnot. So this isn't to scare anybody. This is just to let's be realistic here. This pyramid is organized this way. Like, we didn't come up with this, right? Like, this is organized. We're not just saying, this is not just what Phil and Shane are saying. This is an actual concept that was put together by many experts and many years of understanding a person's financial life and health. And this is in this specific order for a very specific reason. So,
but let's say you start investing your money and you're not taking care of the base, and then something happens, and then you have to go dip into your savings, or
you start clawing back the progress you've been making.
Exactly.
Right? So.
But then what if it's just an RSP, a registered retirement pension plan? When you take it out, you're being taxed on it.
Well, not necessarily when it's registered,
it.
But if it's like a TFSA, for example, is registered, you're not going to get taxed when you pull it out. But the RSP is for retirement. It's not for your disability.
Yeah.
It's not for your emergency, right? So that's why you do it in TFSA. But you'll get penalized, and that's why you get those people that say, like, "Oh, I'm not going to put money in an RSP. They'll take half of it when I pull it out, anyways."
Right.
Well, it's probably because you know somebody that was in that circumstance where they ignored and neglected the 2 first levels of the pyramid. They went right to, like, I'm gonna fill up my RSP, and something happens to them, and now they got to pull out their RSP that maybe they have 20 grand in, and when they realize they're being taxed on it, they're like, oh, this is probably not the best path to take in terms of priorities. So,
and then you get frustrated.
And
then you'll say it doesn't work, and I had a bad
You'll tell all your
experience,
friends and your family on how this stuff doesn't work, and it's a load of bull, and you know what I mean? So it's just not effective. Concept that I explain constantly with my clients is, look, if you have a 5-year objective, you want to buy a house in 5 years, we've determined that it'll cost you this much per month to invest in a first home savings account with a, I don't know, let's say 3.5% interest rate that we've invested in a guaranteed interest account. And you should get to, I'm just throwing numbers here, let's say 20 grand in 5 years. And that's their objective. And they can put, let's say, I said 500 per month. Let's say, for example, let's say they can afford 600 per month. Well, they're going to say, well, I can afford 600, so I'll just put 600 in the FHSA and I'll get there quicker. Might shave off 9 months or 6 months of that 5 years. What happens if you get to year 4 and that $100, instead of being put into one of the first levels of the pyramid, into a disability coverage, for example, what happens at year 4, you slip and fall on a patch of ice, bad luck, smack your hip good enough that you can't work for a year. Where's the money going to come from for the next year? Bills aren't going to stop. Like you said a while ago, creditors don't pity you if you're off and you can't work. You got to pay it back. And for the cost of $100 a month that you can afford, and you blindly want it to just get the house quicker, you now are going to be reset. Those 4 years of progress are going to be completely thrown out the window. You're going to have to use that money towards making sure that you can pay your bills and survive, which, by the way, probably won't even be enough, and your disability would have been enough. It's just not a good scenario. It's just not a smart way of doing things at all. It's not. And we want to make sure, it's important to want these goals and want to invest money and build those habits, build your future.
It's not as expensive as people think.
It's not. It's not. I'm using numbers as examples here, but it's
the disability could be like if you already have disability and you just need to complementary in order to get as close as 100% of your salary. You could be thinking maybe they have 80% and maybe 80% is enough for you to cover your bill because you have a high income.
Yes.
Maybe it's not. So that's why it's good to do a proper financial analysis with a financial advisor.
Correct.
And then able to determine that and determine, with your bills and what comes in and with the income you're making and with the current coverage you have. And maybe you just need to have an extra few $100 a month coming in. And it's going to be inexpensive for you to have to complete that needs or that gap that you have within your coverage.
I've done disability policies for $20 a month, just complementing what they already have at work, just because the expenses that they had monthly were more than the amount that their work disability covered. So they didn't have, if something would happen and they can't work, the amount of money they would get from their work disability was not enough to cover the bills. And they were just short by like maybe $500. Well, $500 is still a lot of money per month, and it's a lot of bills that are going to remain unpaid. So they got just a small disability policy that pays them $500 a month to complement it. They know that the expenses are covered. They can go through and hit their next objectives, knowing that whatever they put aside will stay aside. Every cent you put away will stay there and be dedicated for its objective, and it won't come clawing back if something happens to you. You've already taken care of that. You can take care of the rest stress-free. So important to look at it that way. Then we climb the pyramid and look at growth. At this point, world's your oyster. Real estate, stocks, gold, all of those other diversificatory investments, things that are gonna open up your portfolio and make you the rich, wealthy financial guru that you dream to be, right? But that level is definitely not going to be in your, well, for the most part, very rarely going to be in your 20s. Even early 30s at sometimes. Like you're not looking at that level yet until probably later when you've settled a lot of things. Everything's in place and in order. You've gotten comfortable with your cash flow, and now you're just starting to grow. And that comes from your own self-teachings. We're not going to advise you on what real estate to buy and what the timing is for stocks and gold and whatnot. Like that's not
digital
our job.
Currency
Like crypto and like, these are all things that are very relevant in today's industry, and people. At the end of this episode, I can think of a lot of people right now that I know personally that invest in crypto like religiously, and I know they don't have anything taken care of under the pyramid. Like crypto is like the cap.
It's very versatile.
It's very versatile, but it's just that it's the cap. Like crypto should not be anywhere near your first financial decisions, like at all. Like as well as gold or real estate or diversifying like your invest stocks and stuff like that. It's not a bad thing, but I'm saying that it definitely should not be. If you like, we just talked about 5 levels in this pyramid before getting to this one, right? Like that are super important. So there's no reason whatsoever. There's no excuse whatsoever to not take care of those bottom levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the pyramid of of the financial priorities.
Yeah.
I think we summed up pretty good.
Yes.
On that
Agreed.
side. So at the base, make sure you cover your death, disability, and critical illness. Build your emergency fund, debt repayment, and then start investing into the RRSPs, TFSAs, RESPs if you have children, if you want them to have some educational
An education
funds.
fund, yeah.
And to buy a house.
First home.
Exactly. And then after that, you can go into your bonds and your investment funds and your stock, your real estate, your crypto, and play with that.
Accelerating your loan repayments if need be, if you have outstanding balances on high interest credit, and then you can start dumping money into that to get that out and free up that cash flow for the next step of your financial journey, which is the growth. So yeah, we think we summed it up pretty well there. Yeah, and if there's any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comments as usual.
We'll put the pyramid too in the
in the description. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, at the beginning of the podcast, we mentioned that we're going to put this in the description. It will be there. There'll be a link in the description where you can click on it and download a PDF where you'll be able to see exactly what we just talked about today, full breakdown of it. And I think it's really important. Make this relevant. Understand this and implement this concept into your financial planning, into just your general financial understanding. This will definitely give you a route of, prioritizing things. Where do I start? This should answer it. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. So that was today's episode. We appreciate you watching as usual. Like, comment, and subscribe wherever it is you're watching. And let us know what you think of these concepts. Any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comments as usual. My name was Shane, joined here by Phil today. And this was the Harbor Trust Financial Podcast. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye, everybody.